This week on Choice Hacking. Coca-Cola is unquestionably the most memorable brand on earth. In fact, if you're of a certain age, you might have found yourself singing along to that 90s jingle that I just played, even if you haven't heard it in 20-odd years. Next to the word okay, Coca-Cola is actually the second most understood word across every language, country, and culture on earth. And that's not a mistake. It's the result of over 100 years of careful and deliberate brand management, marketing, advertising, and influencing of culture, all in the service of lodging its logo, brand, and product firmly in people's minds. But how did Coke do it? Why did it work? And what can we learn from their strategy? Join me today as we examine the psychological side of Coke's century-long success and how we can use its strategies to grow our own brands and businesses. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's podcast, Choice Hacking Training. Did you know that Choice Hacking is not just a podcast? We're also an e-learning platform, a marketing consulting firm, and we do a lot of corporate training that can get your teams using the power of behavioral science, psychology, and AI to drive your bottom line. We've worked with companies across the US and Europe, brands like T-Mobile and agencies like Signal Theory and Havas to help their employees learn the nuts and bolts of applied behavioral science, become more persuasive presenters using psychology and AI, and even polish their leadership skills with the power of evidence-based approaches. Sound interesting? Well, just visit choicehacking.com/training to learn more. That's choicehacking.com/training. Now on to the show. If you're a marketer, you're in the memory-making business, whether you realize it or not. Even the most brilliant brands, products, apps, and campaigns will fail if they're forgettable. You might be surprised to learn that one of the main reasons new products fail isn't because people don't like them. It's just that they forget. They forget to look for it on the shelf, to use it after they bought it, or recommend it to their friends. So how do you create memorable products and brands? Well, psychology and behavioral science gives us 7 ways, which I've codified into Choice Hacking's Creates framework. To be unforgettable, you'll need to apply these 7 psychology and behavioral science principles. And they are consistency, repetition, emotion, attention, time and frequency, experience, and storytelling. Unsurprisingly, Coke hits all 7 of these out of the ballpark. Here's how. First is consistency. If you want someone to remember your brand, don't change the logo, the packaging, the brand colors, or even the spokesperson for years. Coca-Cola is one of the most consistent brands in history. Its logo and bottle have barely changed in the last 100 years. Sure, there's been tweaks here and there, but the Coke logo from 1912 looks almost identical to the logo in 2024. When you keep these elements, called brand assets, consistent for years, they start to work a groove into people's brains. Customers can't help but remember your brand when they've seen the same logo millions of times. And the better your brand is remembered, the more likely people are to buy it. Next is repetition. If you want people to remember your brand and what it sells, you can't just tell them once. You can't tell them twice. You have to tell them thousands and thousands of times. Consistency and repetition go hand in hand. When you show someone the same logo thousands of times over the span of 20, 30, or 40 years, it's easy to remember. But what if you show your customer 10 different logos in 20 years? Well, then it's nearly impossible to create memories because to the customer, the brand is always changing. It's why companies like Coca-Cola spend more than $4 billion a year on advertising that puts those brand assets on display, without talking about their prices or product features. It's just a simple marketing truth. The more you want someone to remember something, the more you have to repeat it. One of the best examples of repetition in Coke's advertising is its Holidays Are Coming ads, which first ran in 1995. You probably remember the song.
Holidays are coming, holidays are coming, holidays are coming, holidays are coming, holidays are coming. 'Tis the season, watch out, look around, something's coming, coming to town, coming to your town. Always Coca-Cola to your town. Something magic in the night, can you see it shining bright?
Every year, people post on social media saying things like, the holidays don't really begin until I see that Coca-Cola trucks ad. The Holidays Are Coming ad has become iconic. And commercials, logos, and brands can't become iconic if they only run 1 or 2 years. They have to become something that people rely on seeing year after year. Now let's talk about one of the elements that Coke really excels at, and that is emotion. If you want people to remember your brand and its products, you have to make them emotional. Behavioral science tells us that emotions are like superglue. They make information stickier and more likely to be remembered. Deloitte Digital did a ton of research around this and found that positive emotional experiences can drive business results. 92% of customers are more likely to stay loyal to a brand with which they have a positive emotional connection. 88% of customers are more likely to spend more with brands about which they feel positively. And 91% of customers are willing to advocate for businesses with which they associate positive emotions. Coca-Cola famously owns happiness. It's spent billions of dollars associating the brand with the feeling of being happy. Its taglines have traded on happiness, emotions, and feelings for years. In 1979, their tagline was "Have a Coke and Smile." In 1989, it was "Can't Beat the Feeling." 2009, "Open Happiness." And in 2016, "Taste the Feeling." Coca-Cola doesn't just talk happy. Its ads show happiness too, featuring smiling people enjoying Coca-Cola products while doing something that makes them happy, going on a date, dancing, or spending a day at the beach. Coca-Cola wants people to experience happiness too, through its experiential marketing, like the world's first vending machine that exchanged hugs for bottles of Coca-Cola. So we've covered consistency, repetition, and emotion. Now let's talk about attention, a key part of creating memories. Salience bias describes our attraction to things that are easy for our eyes to notice. Coke's brand colors, for example, red and white, are attention-grabbing due to their high contrast and brightness. Display those colors against busy backgrounds like London's Piccadilly Circus or Times Square in New York, and you can spot them a mile away. But the brand's salience isn't just down to its colors. The simplicity of Coca-Cola's marketing also makes it stand out. They are trying to say too much in any one ad, and they never water them down with clutter that distracts customers or overwhelms the eye. Even if you're repeating a consistent message, you still need to give these messages time to sink in. That's where our next memory-building principle comes in: time and frequency. Does this mean you should invest all your money in playing the same TV commercial 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long? No. In fact, it's much more effective to leave some time for customers to digest what they've seen before seeing it again. Even though research tells us that wear out on a commercial is basically non-existent, it's still important to give people a little time and space to digest what they've seen. The spacing effect says a brand is more memorable when it's seen multiple times and those views are spread out over time, not one right after the other. A steady drip approach is much more effective than a constant barrage of ads or short bursts of activity. Coca-Cola's large media budget means it can afford to buy lots of marketing across different channels like TV, sports sponsorships, social media, websites, billboards, and in-store advertising. The more times a Coke ad is featured in different contexts, the higher the chance people will be exposed to the brand. And the longer the brand advertises in many different contexts, countries, and channels, the more memorable it becomes. But deep memories of the brand are only created if customers are exposed to these ads for years. So like Coca-Cola, plan for consistent marketing year-round. You don't have to spend $4 billion a year, but make sure you're not spending too much time and money on short bursts of activity, and instead are spreading out your message across the year. So now that we're repeating an emotional and attention-grabbing message with a steady drip over time, what's a way to create even deeper memories faster? Experience, our next principle. Think about it this way. If you want to teach someone a new concept, learning by doing, also called experiential learning, is the most effective method. If you want your child to learn how to add, for example, using physical blocks so they can combine and separate, instead of relying on abstract numbers written on a piece of paper, is more effective in getting them to understand the concept of addition. When we physically experience something, it increases the chances that we'll absorb and remember the concept. Experiences are sticky. They become memories much more easily than random information. So it makes sense that customer experiences and experiential marketing are so important to brands like Coca-Cola. The brand wants to drive the feeling of happiness with its experiential marketing, and it makes its products and brand assets the star of the show. For example, Coke installed a happiness machine in the middle of a college campus. It dispensed free soda, flowers, a pizza, and even a huge submarine sandwich for anyone to share. Coca-Cola wanted people to share a moment of happiness with others over a free bottle of Coke, therefore associating the feeling of happiness with the brand Coca-Cola. Narrative bias says that people make sense of the world through stories. That's why the last principle in our CREATES model is storytelling. Our brains have to process a lot of information, so we pay more attention to and better remember narratives instead of random information. That's why it's easier to remember the plot of Hamilton than it is to memorize the amendments to the Constitution. Our brains remember the story of a musical, but it has a harder time stringing together random information that doesn't necessarily seem connected. Coca-Cola thinks carefully about the stories that it tells in its marketing. It knows the power that stories have to create memories, so it wants to make sure that the brand and its products feature prominently in these stories. Kate Santori, who's a director at Coca-Cola, describes storytelling at Coke this way. At Coca-Cola, we want to create Coca-Cola stories, and not stories by Coca-Cola. That holds true when our product is a character in the story with a credible role to play. There are 4 typical archetypes, templates, that we look to: object of desire, embodiment of an attitude, social connector, and functional offering or benefit. In other words, when Coca-Cola creates a TV ad, a bottle of Coke is often the main character. And that main character needs to be desired. It needs to be symbolic of happiness or a certain type of attitude. It needs to connect to people. Or it needs to be something that someone offers to someone else as a way to create happiness or connection. Creating memories is a proven way to create value, find customers, and grow market share. It's down to a marketing principle called mental availability. It was coined by Professor Byron Sharp, a marketing researcher at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, and someone who I'm sure most of the marketers listening to this are familiar with. His theory is that to grow your brand, you need 2 things. First is mental availability. So, does this brand or product spring to mind when it's time to buy? Do people recognize it? Do they notice it on the shelf? And second is physical availability. So, can I get or find this product easily when I'm in the mood to buy it? And that's why creating memories is so important for every customer experience. It's not just about being remembered for memory's sake. It's about being sought out, recognized, and top of mind when it's time for customers to buy. Thank you for listening to the Choice Hacking Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on social media. It takes me 20 plus hours to put together every episode, and it is a huge help when you share an episode with your LinkedIn, Twitter, Threads, Instagram, or even your TikTok followers. And don't forget, you can learn more about behavioral science and psychology applied to business when you subscribe to the free Choice Hacking newsletter. You'll join more than 8,000 brilliant entrepreneurs and marketers from companies like Google, Disney, and yes, Coca-Cola, who get my newsletter. To sign up, just visit choicehackingideas.com. That's choicehackingideas.com. Until next time.
I hit record a drop, you can't ignore it. I'm transforming now these cars and planes, I'm always boarding. Just out touring down in Charlotte like I play for Hornets.